Walking is such a mundane human function that we don't even think about it when we do it. We just walk. Our brain sends signals to our legs and feet, but we don't recognize that happening. All the while, we scan our environment for obstacles and shifts in terrain and adjust accordingly. Again, it's all automatic. Next to zero conscious brain power is being used to do all of these amazing things. Most of the time, I bet you don't even think about walking or running in a video game either. You just push the analog stick forward, and the person or thing you're controlling moves. Behind the scenes, developers are toiling away trying to get the most seemingly inconsequential things right. Because if you don't notice, then they've done their jobs correctly. But I do notice. Like shooting, or sword fighting, or punching, certain games feel better to walk around in than others. This doesn't mean that the more realistic the walking gets, the better it feels. Not at all. Good walking needs to strike a balance between that realism and good feedback. Let's talk about the games I think do it the best, and compare them to ones I think do it the worst. Zelda's most recent 3D outings, the Of the duology, are, to me, the best examples of video game walking technology. In my opinion, there are two things a game has to accomplish to get its walking right. Great locomotion needs to serve the kind of world the player's residing in, but it also needs to facilitate the wider gameplay experience that's on offer. What I think most games get wrong when it comes to something like this is how, especially in a 3D space, the player character doesn't exactly look or feel like an actual part of the world. A lot of games get close, but sometimes the character's feet are slightly detached from the ground and they look like they're floating a little bit, or the world feels like it's moving under you instead of you moving through it when you move the analog stick. Like running on solid ground versus running on a treadmill. Mark Brown from Game Maker's Toolkit made an excellent video a long-ass time ago about how Celeste nails this feeling in 2D. Adding an axis makes this feeling a lot harder to get down, but Zelda gets it right with similar philosophies. For all the things Breath of the Wild did to become the genre-defining game that it is, I think this is one of the most important parts. New Frame Plus made a great video around the release of Tears of the Kingdom in which he attempted to count the number of individual animations Link has for simply walking and running around the world. It's a really interesting one and you should go watch it, but if you don't want to, I'm just going to talk about my biggest takeaway from it in the context of the thing I'm talking about.
Not every AAA game character needs as many as Link has here. Some get away with fewer. Others require way more. And I admit, Link probably has even more unique locomotion animations than I've managed to find and list here. Again, this is all educated guesswork.
And he's completely right. The difference between Zelda and something like Red Dead Redemption 2 is how those animations facilitate the wider gameplay experience. Any normal person who's played Red Dead 2 should be able to see, feel, and understand Arthur's basic locomotion. Rockstar's aspirations for realism result in a very accurate portrayal of a 6'1", 200-ish pound slab of man meat. He has a swath of various animations and small details that convey his mannerisms and show us what kind of person he is, even if the player isn't really thinking about it. It is extremely impressive on a technical and artistic front, but that doesn't come without a cost. I find Arthur Morgan painful to control. Rockstar did make Arthur feel like a real person moving through the world. They solved that treadmill problem, but they created an entirely new one in the form of real-life input lag and poor player feedback. That was a big reason I really don't like the game as much as I wish I did. It wasn't fun to play as Arthur. It didn't feel good to move him around, or ride a horse, and that almost completely de-incentivized me from exploring what is an undeniably dense and interesting place. Almost. Served the world, but it didn't serve the gameplay. Now, let's talk about what I think is the worst offender in this entire walking situation. Xenoblade Chronicles is a hard one to dissect. Ultimately, it's one of those games where I look past something like this and get my satisfaction from the unique combat, the deep RPG mechanics. But it is a series whose core identity is tied to endlessly running through and exploring these giant, beautiful worlds. So, let's compare it to Zelda and see what we've got going on. At first glance, Xenoblade Chronicles DE and Zelda control very similarly. Both Shulk and Link have walking animations that lead into their jogs, and both have a perceivably low amount of input lag. But something about walking around as Shulk just doesn't feel right. Shulk doesn't really have a lead-in to his walking animation. When you move Link, he has a lead-in to his movement, no matter if he's starting with a walk, a jog, or breaking into a full sprint. He also has turning animations, animations for when he slows down or immediately changes directions, and so on and so forth. They aren't hyper-realistic like Red Dead 2's, but Zelda excels in striking a balance between what it needs to sell that sense of realism to the player, while also feeling good to move around. Most importantly though, going back and looking at Shulk, it's pretty easy to see that the steps he takes don't exactly match the distance he's actually moving. In his walk, for example, his steps are small, but he's moving way faster than it realistically looks like he should, and that also applies to his run. You take the lack of weight given to him also, and that's how you end up getting that treadmill effect. Monolith got better at this over time though. Characters in Xenoblade 3 have more movement animations that sell it more than the characters do in 1. The steps the characters take actually match the distance they're moving this time, so that's good. There's still a lack of weight while moving around, but it feels tight. In a video about walking, I'd be remiss to not talk about Death Stranding. I don't think it feels as good to move Sam around as it does Link, but Death Stranding does get both things right, and, you know, fucking better, right? Sam moves around in a hyper-realistic way, similar to Arthur Morgan, but without all of that input lag. The amount of weight he's carrying determines his speed. He moves differently through different types of terrain. He'll trip on rocks, he'll shift his weight on inclines and declines, and everything in between. Most importantly, the steps he takes match the distance he's covering. He absolutely feels like a part of the world he's in. But does this movement facilitate Death Stranding's overall gameplay experience? Yeah. It's what the game is. I can't exactly explain why I consider Zelda to be the best when Death Stranding also does this so well. It might just be that I like Zelda more overall, but as far as walking goes, I think they're neck and neck. Game feel is such a vague, subjective thing to talk about. It has some tried and true rules that work as a baseline, but it's not universal. What feels good to someone might not to someone else, and a lot of people probably don't care at all. Walking, especially so. But for now, if there's a game you think does it better, let me know. If I haven't checked it out already, you might be able to convince me. Thanks.